Welcome. My name is Dr. Robert Britton III, and I'm a business educator. Welcome to the Collective Conversation. This is a dialogue driven platform where we're going to be exploring community, consciousness, and collective power. This is a place where we're going to have scholars, leaders, coaches, educators, sports stars, and even change agents to come together to move beyond talk because that is what's built to last. Today, I have my friend, Miss Kristy Johnson here in studio. She's an assistant principal. She's a scholar. She's a business entrepreneur. She is a athlete mom, and she's also a mom athlete. So I'm excited to share the space with her and want to ask her the number one question for our platform. So Kristy, go ahead and introduce yourself, and I want to ask you that question.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here with you today to have this conversation. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and what you do. So thank you for having me today to have this conversation. As Dr. Britton said, I'm an assistant principal at a large high school, 10th through 12th grade. We have about 1,600 students. So challenging day every day, but I love every second of it. More importantly than that, I'm a mom, got two kids, one that will be 16 in 2 weeks, and then an 11-year-old who plays every sport imaginable and keeps me running the roads to do that. And in the meantime, I try to keep myself healthy, do a lot of running, working out, and then just, a lot of mental well-being is what I've really gotten into lately, just really taking care of myself. So that's the journey I've been on lately.
I love it. And we're going to really tap into athlete mom and mom athletes. So excited about
Sure.
that conversation. But let's go ahead and start with the number one question. How important are conversations to you?
So, conversations to me are incredibly important, and it really took me a while in my adult life to get to the point where I was able to have conversations, those difficult, hard conversations that sometimes people shy away from and they're a little bit afraid of because sometimes conversations are uncomfortable. Conversations break down walls, but in the same sense, they soften relationships. Truth comes out in conversations. And I think that in order to really get to the root of a problem or solve a problem, come up with any type of solution, you have to have those conversations and know where somebody's coming from. And from the stance of a leader, I think it's more important to talk with people, not at people. They're way more likely to listen to you if you can have the conversation, get the buy in from them, and let them know that it's a shared vision.
I love that. I love that we're tapping into softening the relationships. And I know that that's one thing, just knowing you personally, that you are really into is making sure that the relationship is there to build trust beyond just the transactional piece. And I love the fact that you were talking about a shared vision. So we're going to keep on that vein. And we're just going to open up just with some key conversations to just get this flowing. When you think about your leadership at best, and you were just talking about like softening in it, and I always look at leadership as being posture, not a position. So it's not positional, but it's when you like break it down and it's all about being real. What do you believe people misunderstand most about power when it actually comes to working inside a community? And you talked about your large high school, so I'm thinking like community can be outside the building or even inside the building. So, what do you think people believe or misunderstand the most about how power actually works in those communities?
I look at it from, like you said, from a sense of within my school and then just a larger community. But I think to me, the most common misconception about leadership or power is that it's based off of a title. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that it's more about the mission, the vision of what you're doing. It's a shared sense of responsibility. Obviously, in any situation, there needs to be a leader who stands out and, you know, directs the flow. But it means nothing to have a title. Anybody can make their way up in an organization or a system and have a certain title, but unless that comes with being able to have the conversations and build the relationships and share the vision with the people around you, then really there is no power.
Oh, I love that. And as you're talking about the shared vision and as you're talking about working with other people. And yes, there has to be a positional leader, right? So there always has to be somebody at the top, but that person, he or she gives you that shared vision. You're able to work towards it like a collective unit, right? And so one of the things that I'm getting from, just hearing this conversation so far is about relationships. So I want to know a little bit more about relationships when it comes to not only your school, but also knowing you in the community. So why do relationships matter so much when it comes to leadership? And especially in schools, why do relationships matter?
I think that a relationship is the foundation for anything that you're trying to build. And, there's a lot of things in my life that I haven't been good at, and there's a lot of things I have been good at. But one thing I think I've always been gifted with is being able to build relationships. And they're so important. Anytime you're setting out to do anything, especially with a group of people, you have to build the trust with those people first, and that trust comes from building a relationship. And if you don't know the people that you're trying to lead, then you can't lead them. They're not going to follow you in any direction if you don't take the time to get to know them, but also to be open and a little bit vulnerable sometimes and allow them to get to know who you really are. So to me, I preach relationships all the time, especially in my job. All the time, that's what I tell our teachers. You've got to build the relationships before you can build the rigor in the classroom. Because if you can build the relationship with that kid who maybe doesn't do well anywhere else, if you build that relationship, they're going to do anything for you. And it's just such a great thing to have, an attribute to have if you can build the ability to build relationships with people. You can go so much further with anything that you're trying to do.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And you think about some of the things, you being an athlete and you having a young son that plays every sport imaginable. You think of like you can't show how much you know until you show them how much you care.
Right.
And I even did a study on this, and my biggest determinant factor of building such determination for people is how do you build relationships? And so that's so big, and I'm glad that we were able to tap into that. But the one thing I also caught when I started studying relationships and I started studying empowerment was that people don't leave positions or they don't leave jobs. They leave situations because of another person and not necessarily the actual situation itself. So when you think about being a leader, what do leaders often underestimate about the role of relationships and how they play in real change?
I think a lot of times what's underestimated is how long it can take to build relationships sometimes. And I think with different people, there's different tracks and different ways to build relationships. And there's always going to be those people that sometimes it takes a while. And I think that, we underestimate that and think that, well, I was able to build a relationship with this person. Why haven't I been able to build this one yet? It just takes longer with some people. And you have to just continue to be consistent and continue to show up in that relationship and show who you are. It takes a lot of patience. I think that's another thing that's underestimated, the amount of patience it takes sometimes to build those relationships, because you may get to a point where it's like, okay, when is this going to happen? I've done everything I know how to do. I'm here, I'm consistent, and it's just not, the relationship is not building, but it will come. It's just sometimes harder with some people.
That's great. That's great. And I wrote a book about consistency, and the essence of the book is about happiness. And in order to actually build true happiness, you have to build sustainability and joy. But sustainability and joy doesn't come until you build consistency. So when you find little happy moments, that's when consistency is started to build up. And those moments of gratitude, those moments of happiness ultimately become sustainable. And that's where the essence of joy comes in. So when you talk about relation, I hear you speak about it. It like wows me because you're saying exactly what the science says, right? It's like you have to, be patient. You have to be able and want to spend some time because just doing one action isn't going to necessarily build the trust necessary in order for that relationship to be sustainable, or for that relationship to be consistent on any basis. And with that being said, I know when we talk about your leadership, you you lead in so many different ways, right? You don't even lead just in your school building, you lead in your community. One thing I marvel at sometimes when it comes to watching your platform is how many people respect you and how many smiles are on people's faces and you're out in the community. So with that being said, I want to know a little bit more about how you take that leadership and take it into your community. So when you engage with the community in multiple areas, you've talked about sports, we've talked about business entrepreneurship, and even being a teen mom. How does the space inform you to show up as a school leader? And then how does a school leader help you show up in those spaces?
It's a great question. I think that all of those things for me have kind of come full circle at this point, and they all go hand in hand. Being in the community and involved in so many things that we are because of my son and everything that he does, I see people in so many different areas. So I'm able to observe people, in a school setting, but then some of those same people outside of a school setting, out in the community. So I see who they really are, and that gives me a different perspective a lot of times on people. I think that's one of the biggest things that it has taught me is that, what you see on the surface of people sometimes is not all that they are. There's more to them. I'm always kind of shocked sometimes when I see people in the community doing other things, involved in other things that I never would have known if I was not out and involved in those things myself. One thing about me, and I'm sure you know this just from knowing me, is I'm going to be me no matter where I am. So you can pick me up and drop me in any situation, and I'm still going to be me. And I've always kind of had the attitude of, you can take it or leave it. This is who I am. There's no shame to me and who I am. So 100% all the time. I'm the same leader at work that I am in a community. And I'm always going to lead with what I think is right by other people. I have a saying that I tell my kids all the time, and I say it at work all the time, and my kids probably get sick of it because I have it posted in my house as well, but it's just kind of what we go back to. And I always tell them, if you do what's right, you will never be wrong. And
Mm,
it's not, it's
that's
not
beautiful.
about, oh, I don't ever want to be wrong, but it's, you do what's right for yourself, but you also do what's right by other people, and you don't ever have to worry about doing something wrong. You can lay your head down at night knowing I've done the best I can do in that situation. I've done what's right for that person and for myself. So I can rest my head easy knowing that I've done that. So, and I think that just coming back to the community aspect and being in so many different places, it's given me the ability, like I said, to get to know so many different types of people and to understand people and how they interact with one another. I've learned so much from that that's enabled me to put that into leadership and know how to approach people, how to deal with people, how to remain calm in situations sometimes when it's a little bit difficult to do so. But you have to, especially in the sports world, you get some upset parents out there, but you have to understand sometimes where that's coming from. Once you have that empathy for people and try to really understand who they are, then it sometimes makes a lot more sense.
Good. Listen, I'm so glad that my seat has a back to it because I about fell out my chair when you said, if you do it right, you'll never be wrong. I love that.
Isn't
That's a
that great?
nugget that needs to go on a shirt.
I
Uh,
know. That's
man,
what I said.
listen, we got to put that on a shirt for you. My
Yeah.
team, you hear it
It's
now.
it's
Listen.
so simple, but it's
Yeah.
so profound at the same time.
Right.
I was one day kind of thinking through an issue, and I was like, why is this so hard for you? Do what's right in this situation, and then it's not wrong. And so that's just kind of where it was birthed from.
Right. I love it. Listen, we've got to get you a shirt. Team, if you're listening, we gotta get her a shirt.
Yes.
Gotta get her a shirt. She deserves it. And we gotta put KJ at the bottom just to make sure she has it.
Yes, I love
Listen,
it.
that is so dope. If you it's right, you'll never be wrong. And I definitely want to stay in this vein because it is so important. And a lot of people look at us as educators because it's that first line of authenticity where I don't have to be performative. I can actually be myself. And a lot of students that used to come into my classroom when I was in the classroom, and even a lot of student spaces I speak in now, they love just the authenticity. Like, he is himself, and I love to be myself around him just so that I can, build growth within myself. But I would tell you, being yourself scares people. And people
Mhm.
have told me that, like, you can't be this real, or are you real? I've heard this in business ventures. I've heard this in the dating world. Like, people are just like, this can't be real. And it's like, dude, what you see is what you get. Like,
Right.
I don't want to wear a mask anymore. I've spent 30 plus years wearing a mask in certain spaces, and I don't want to do it anymore, right? And I think that that's a great segue into my next question. But I think that I'm going to take what you said to heart about, if it's right, then you can't be wrong. So
Right.
if you are just being yourself all the time and authentic, then people can really get to know you and then really vibe with you. And once again, you're not always for everybody, so that's okay too. But at the same time, as long as you're respectful, I believe one time somebody told me that respect costs you nothing, but the rewards are great. So as long
Mhm.
as you're respectful and you can show up to places as yourself, you'll be okay. So important, such a big nugget. So my next question is, so how do you build trust in people who don't always see school as a welcoming place? Because we're dealing, especially in high school, and you're in a large high school, we're dealing with young adults. And these young adults that are getting ready to be adults that are very impressionable, they don't really feel that school's welcoming. And I work in a lot of educational leadership space, and there's a lot of teachers that don't feel welcomed at school. So, how do you build trust in people who don't always see your building as a welcoming place?
This is a word I'll come back to probably often in this conversation, but being consistent, continuing to show up, and most importantly, do what you say that you're going to do, follow through with it. And I think, especially for young people today, students, if you tell them that you're going to do something, you got to do it. Because once they see you not do what you said you're going to do, then that trust is gone, and likelihood of you ever getting that back is very minimal. And a lot of times they're not used to consistency. They're not used to people being supportive or doing the things that they say that they're going to do. So for me, it's, I'm constantly reminding myself in my day to day work, okay, you got to be there. You got to show up every day, no matter what's going on outside, out here in life. I got to show up as my best self today for these kids within in these walls, because that's my purpose. That's my passion. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. And what they need from me really more than anything is presence, and showing them, I'm here to support you, and I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. And I think that carried out into the community as well. You show that you can be trusted, you show that you are consistent, you show that you follow through on things. And once people begin to see that in your character, then that trust starts to build. But again, the first time that you break that, and you do something totally opposite of your character or the character you've tried to portray, then people see right through it.
Woo. Man, I'm so glad I had you today. This is so good. Yes. Man, I used to tell my coaches all the time, like, the one group of people that's going to tell you that you're full of it is students. They'll read right
Yep.
through it. So I'm telling you, the first time you do something, they're gonna be like, "Oh, I'm checking you. If you out
100%.
partying, doing something that you're not supposed to do, show up on some type of newspaper, some type of news, the kids are gonna be there." And
That's
they and
right.
now and that was, I was in the classroom 6 years ago, so I can't even imagine with these cell phones that would be popping for these kids now. They like, oh, did you see this person? That is great. That is great. And I love the fact that you were talking about being present. I believe the best ability is availability. And it doesn't really cost you that much to be available. And I understand that you can always show up for everyone. And what I try to teach in my platform is first show up for yourself. you can show up for other people when you first show up for yourself. When you're able to fill your cup, then you can go around and fill other people's cups. So when we talk about building a community and building a collective, it's really about, can you show up full to be able to serve, right? Or that servant leadership, that ability to be present in the time. So I think that, when you talk about being present, when you talk about being available, that is such a part of life. And I think that a lot of our students, when you talk about younger generation, I think that they are working, overtime to try to learn how to show up, because a lot of people don't show up for them. And it excites me. It tickles my heart. Like I said, I follow you on platforms, and I love when, seeing you taking pictures with your athletes and taking pictures with your teachers. And I'm just like, you know, she's available, she's present, and you're a respected leader. So keep doing that. And you already talked about trust, and you already talked about being present, but I just want to ask you, is there anything else that the community presence has taught you about leadership that formal training never could? And I know you've sat through formal training, especially with me, and it's not always easy to sit in formal training, but at the same time, is there something that you've learned in life, community, that formal training can't teach you about leadership?
I think what even in leadership training that we go through for education, I think that what nobody tells you is that it's hard. You know, it's not always going to be a cakewalk every day. Kind of going back to what you said about what's a misconception about leadership is that it's okay, well, I'm a leader now. Things are going to be a little bit easier for me, but and it's not. It's difficult on a lot of days, and I think that that's something that a training could never prepare you for, is how to deal with those difficulties. The challenges are going to come every single day. So, how do I deal with the challenges while also being who I need to be as a leader? How do I keep those challenges from dragging me down to a point where my negativity is spilling out onto other people and just completely crushing the vision, the journey that we're all on? So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just the difficulty of it sometimes, and how to deal with that difficulty, how to manage the stresses that come with being a leader along with your everyday life. I have to sometimes, when I leave work in the afternoons, I talked about I like to run, so a lot of times I run before work, and that gets my mind moving for the day. It's my time of peace when I can really think through the day, prayer time for me. But then in the afternoons, some days I come home and I'll go for another run. And it's not just because I'm, crazy and think I need to go for another run, but I need to decompress from what has happened during the day so that I don't bring that home to my kids. There has to be that separation. And that's something I had to really learn when I first became a leader in a leadership role, was that how am I going to deal with the stress that's placed on me now and keep it from affecting my home life.
Oh man, this has got to be the easiest interview I've ever done. This is amazing. And what you're speaking to is resiliency building. I coach this all the time, and when you have resiliency building, there's 5 R's that I go through, and one of them is you reflect, and you reflect on what's going on. You recognize the stressors or the good moments, or happy moments. You reward yourself for the happiness, and you release the bad, and then you reinforce and try to keep building from there. So when I think about your decompression runs, I think about like the same thing I do on my beach walks. And yes, I'm showing out, that's a flex there. I live on a beach,
I would
and
love to do that.
and white sand is always a calling name, but I
Yes,
get up and I walk. And when I do those walks, or do those jogs, I love to hear, just, sometimes I don't even wear my headphones. I just hear the waves crashing, and it's just setting a tone. And that really puts us on our next path of what we're speaking on, as we've, touched on the community and how it's helped, build you up as a leader, and how you spend time in the community. And now you're talking and shifting to how you show up. And, that's really about consciousness, right? Like, how do you show up and how do you take your inner self and you're able to give an outward expression? So I want to shift to that inner moment right now. At the beginning of each year, and you and I have talked about this, you're very intentional about aligning and building alignment and purpose. What's your process for setting that intention at the beginning of each year?
Okay, so this started for me on one level a few years ago. Been through some things in my life that, I haven't always made the best choices. I haven't had great relationships. I've been down some heavy, difficult roads. I've had some loss. My father passed at one, years ago, and that took me down a road that I didn't see coming. I didn't know it was going to have that kind of effect on me, and I just kind of felt like I was in a place where I was in a mess. And I almost felt like, okay, you've messed your life up to the point where how are you going to pull back from this? So I really had to stop and go, okay, what do I need to do to be a better me, to be a better mom, to show up for my kids more. And that's where it started. I started in that particular year. Okay, well, I'm going to focus on not doing this and not doing this and then doing this. So that's kind of where it started building. But really, last year, through conversations with you, is where I put it more and a focus on one particular word. And when you and I had that conversation, it just made so much sense to me, rather than focusing on what am I going to not do, and I don't really believe in New Year's resolutions anyway. I just think people set them and they break them and they move on with life. So to me, the focus word gave me a better way to center what I was trying to do. And as you and I talked through it last year, it kind of blew my mind. And you think it's just a word that's so simple. Why would that blow your mind? But it led me to a place of being able to, one, reflect. So, here's my process now for how I come up with it. Reflect on the previous year. What was I able to accomplish? What was I not able to accomplish? Where am I still struggling in life? Okay, so maybe I accomplished these things, but I'm still struggling over here in this area. So what do I need to continue working on? What am I proud of myself for actually accomplishing, and becoming better at? And then where do I need to go from here? So where do I need to adjust my focus?
Wow. I'm not gonna tear up. I'll just, keep them, keep them,
I'll look away.
be strong black man. No, that is exciting. And just like you, I've had bad relationships, quiet is kept. I wrote it in a book, so it is a secret. I've been divorced twice. And, you just get to a point where you're like, I'm messing up somewhere. And what I noticed from this practice was I was doing instead of being.
Mm,
Now, if you need that for a nugget in life,
I love
take
it.
that nugget, right?
Yes.
Stop doing life and just be in life.
Man,
You know what I mean?
that's
And
amazing.
I think a lot of people love to just do, 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 do. And
Hmm.
people say, man, I know I ain't listening to him. He's the guy that has 37 businesses on a plane here, car here, this state, that state. And it's like, but yes, I do a lot, but everything is intentional and it's about being in life. And so I started that practice 2 years ago, and I'm so glad you reached out last year. And I'm so glad that you're continuing the practice because it really is there for people to build on team. And you're human. You're not gonna get it right. That's okay. I think we are so big on trying to get it right. And not a knock on education, but I'll go ahead and knock on education. Education hasn't changed since 1926, I believe. So, since 90 years ago, we're still doing education the same way. And the education is to do. You get in the classroom, you do the work, you get the grades. And I think that that is a big issue. And a lot of students go off to college in order to become what they want to become. And people are like, well, knock on education, everybody needs trades, da 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 da. Nobody needs to go to higher ed. And I'm like, well, part of the higher ed process is that students get away from what you guys have created in 1926 and hasn't changed, in order to have an opportunity to become something. And I was reading an article the other day and it blew my mind. It's like education hasn't changed since 1926, but Starbucks has changed 4 times in the last 50 years. So you think to yourself, like, oh my gosh, like you got like Starbucks since its inception has changed 4 different times, but education has not. So it takes, conversations like this in order to build collective power around, hey, we need to help students come versus to be stuck on doing so much. And I'm so glad that you continue that practice. One thing I want to know, and I believe everyone listening wants to know, would you like to share your word or phrase with us?
I would love to. And my 2026 word goes so hand in hand with what you just said about being more than doing. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute because I need to go back to last year's word in order for this year to make sense. So last year, my word was relentless. And
I
I
love it.
was I was at a place last year, and I'm going to share a little bit, be a little bit vulnerable here, but I was at a place at the beginning of last year where relationships, we just said it. Here I am preaching relationships all the time, and I know how to build relationships and out in life, but when it comes to just a relationship, dating relationships for me, terrible at it. Have been. So the beginning of last year, I said, okay, that's one thing I know I need to work on. So I'm going to pull myself completely back from relationships this year and I'm going to put some focus there. And then I looked at just, you know, life in general. What are some goals that I have not accomplished? Where am I at in my journey of being a mother? And what do I need to work on? And all these things started to come to mind. And it was like, oh, there's so many things. It's going to be difficult, but I have to be relentless in chasing after those things. So for me, that meant hard work. I believe in, and I tell my kids this, you earn every step that you take forward. I don't want anything given to me. And I tell people that about my kids. Like my daughter's at the high school with me, and I tell people all the time, don't treat her a certain way because she's mine. I don't ever want anything given to her. We earn every step that we take forward. To me, that also relentlessness goes back to integrity. you
Mm,
know you got it. Sometimes it's easy to take a little shortcut when nobody's looking,
mm,
but it's that's when integrity comes in. It's doing what's right, doing what you're supposed to do no matter what. And it also comes down to discipline, which is something that I try to instill in my children. And I just think if people can master that art of discipline and putting those certain things in place in life that just kind of have to happen no matter what's going on, that's big. And then overall in that is just finding peace and being relentless and being able to find that peace. So for me, this last year has been a lot of solitude. And sometimes solitude is tough,
mm,
when you sit in that loneliness and you allow yourself to become comfortable in what was always uncomfortable.
mm,
And I realized for me over this past year, that was a lot of my problem. I was very uncomfortable in loneliness. Now, I'm a very independent person. I always have been. I do for myself. I don't, ask for anything from anybody. I want to do it myself. But there's a difference in being independent and loneliness, and I had to really face that this year and being able to take that time to sit in the solitude, get to know myself, understand what I'm willing to accept from other people and what I will no longer accept from other people because I spent a lot of my life accepting treatment that I didn't deserve.
what I'm talking about.
I did it just because I didn't want to be lonely at that time. So
Mm,
this year, though, it's been hard for me. It was powerful in so many ways. I am a much stronger person having this conversation with you today than I was this time last year. And it's just from that pure relentlessness of not giving up. And through this too has come, like, I was trying to relate it to something. So I thought about a palm tree. Okay. Palm trees are what you're probably going to still see standing after a bad hurricane that comes through because they're relentless. They sway with the wind and they may almost go down sometimes, but they usually don't break. They bend, but they don't break. So I kind of keep that in mind, and I have one around my neck that I wear all the time. It's just a constant reminder, I may have to bend sometimes, and I may have to sway a little, and it may get a little tough, but I'm not gonna break. Relentless.
Wow.
So that's how I wrapped up
Oh,
20.
wow. That's amazing. That's crazy. Listen, I
Thank you.
definitely want you to give us the 2026. But I
Okay.
had to pause here to tell you my palm tree story.
Yes,
So I
tell me.
moved here 3 years ago, and I have a palm tree right out in the front of my house. And my neighbor has the same palm tree. Once again, I'm not a horticulture guy, so I don't know which type of palm tree. But I can just tell you that both of ours caught a frost and died. Supposedly,
Okay.
he went cut his out because he's retired. He keeps his lawn very, manicured. Not me. I'm still trying to, kill my grass so that I can saw down or turf grass so I don't have to cut it.
Yes.
But anyway, my palm tree came back. And I'm
Yeah,
talking about full go. And
they
even
will.
last year in the snowstorm, it it didn't bother me at all. And because it grew the layers and everything. So when I'm thinking about your relentless story, I'm like, I have a palm tree that I walk by every single day, and I promise you that there's some days I don't even look up at it. And then there's
Well,
some
now
days
you
that I
will.
pull in, I'm like, wow, I cannot believe that this thing came back. I'm going to
Yeah.
look at that palm tree every day. I promise you this. This is
There you
going to
go.
happen.
I love it.
All
Love
right, so
it.
give us 2026. I got to hear this.
Okay.
2026.
So as I started to think for 26, where am I still struggling? Several areas, but the biggest thing for me is in being relentless, in doing the work, in the discipline, in the endurance of it all. This is where I said it's going to come back to your earlier statement. I have a hard time just being. I do a lot of doing, but I'm not good at just being. So the word I picked for this year is abide. So I have to learn to abide in where I am, in the peace and the comfort of what's already been given to me, the strength that I already have, the beauty of what's around me already, while still working towards those goals. I would say that I'm at peace. I have a lot of peace in my life, but I have to be able to abide in that peace and not be on this constant race to get somewhere. A lot of days I feel like I'm running in 20 different directions because I am. I mean, I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm running and then working out, and then I'm at work, and all day at work it's a very demanding job, and then I come home and it's one thing after another. Got to get this done, this done, this done. But for what? That's what I had to ask myself. What is the end goal? Why are you in such a rush to get all these things done every day? It's okay if on Tuesday you don't make it to the gym, because guess what? There's Wednesday and Thursday, and you just have to be at peace with where you are in the moment and not on a constant race to get something done. And it's going to be hard for me because I have a hard time just sitting still. Even through last year, I talked about the solitude and the loneliness. In a lot of those moments, I was still doing something. Like, I taught myself how to build things last year. I had a table saw in my garage that was my dad's. And one day, while I was alone, I decided I was going to teach myself to build something. I built a bench. I built Liam a bed. I did all these different things because I felt like I had to be doing something all the time. So this will be a challenge for me to be able to sit still sometimes. I want to read something to you real quick
Yeah, go ahead.
that I just kind of wrote for myself as a reminder to come back to. So it's just kind of a grounding, focused place to come back to for that word, and it'll kind of bring it all together and help it make sense. So let me share that with you real quick if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so it says, this year I choose to abide. I will move forward without rushing. I will work hard, but I will not strive past my point of failure. And I will lead without carrying what was never mine to hold. I release the need to prove, to push past my limits for validation, or to live in constant resistance. I remain rooted in peace, trusting that what is meant for me does not require chaos to obtain. I will still show up with discipline, courage, and relentlessness, but my strength will come from rest, not restlessness. I abide anchored and unshaken, confident that steady faith and faithful action are enough.
I love it. Oh my gosh, that needs to be on a shirt too. God, that's amazing. You listen, and you're gonna stick that up everywhere, aren't you?
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is crazy. That is crazy. You've taken this thing to a whole nother level, and I'm excited because now I'm like, do I need to go reflect on mine? No, no, I'm excited. I'm excited for you. And the inner work is so important. And I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to connect in this on this platform because people don't have an opportunity to share these things and these conversations, and you never
Yeah,
know who's going to listen to this or who's going to pick that piece up and say, you know what, I could do something like that. And this is simple, like you said, as a word. Like,
yeah,
I didn't expect it to blossom into this, but this one word took me to this one image of a palm tree, and then understanding what a palm tree can do for me and how I can be like it. And now you're talking about abide. And the one thing, you talked about the palm tree, right? Weather's going to happen, it's going to flex a little bit, but it's still rooted.
right.
And you have an opportunity to continue to root yourself. And then at the same time, take the winds and the storms when they come. Because that's one thing I know for sure. Something's always going to happen. So
Mhm.
there's nothing or way around it. I know people are like, oh, this negativity is not. Yes, yeah. Some negative energy, some negative person, something
Right.
is not going to go your way. But at the same time, and how I always look at it as a reflection piece of my own is if it didn't go my way, then it probably wasn't meant for me anyway, which is okay
Yeah.
for me. And so I do want to transition because I know that I want to respect time. I always do this as an educator, but I want to talk about the last point of our platform, which is a collective power. And as an administrator, you do the work, but you don't do the work alone because you can't. Even you talk about the inner work, we talk about how we were able to connect last year on just on a basic conversation of I needed to talk to someone or I needed to connect with someone that could help me move the needle forward. And I know administrators have to do that often. They have to do that with their district teams. They have to do that with leadership teams within their school building. They have to do with their teachers. And then sometimes you have to lean into the students' collective power to try to get things done and moved in a positive, successful way. From your perspective, why is collective efficacy so crucial in a school building? Why is being a collective so important within a school building?
I think nothing can be accomplished when you have little people. We often say in schools, they're on an island by themselves. And I've been in several schools, but I've been at the school I'm at now for 14 years, so I've seen things come and go. I've seen people come and go, but the most success I've seen is when you have everybody in the same mindset, on the same team, working towards the same goals, and not people, like I said, out on little islands by themselves. So I think, that's why it's so important is you have to build trust, build the relationships, build the team, build the shared vision. So if you have, let's say in a school, if you don't have your teachers on board with what you're trying to do, then you've got nothing. I mean, you can't do anything without your teachers. They're the heart and soul of a school. So you can have this great vision of what I want this place to look like, and you can have all the programs and the professionals and everything else you want to bring in there. But if you don't have the teachers on board with where you're trying to go, then I mean, you're not going to go anywhere. And then what stems from that is the relationship the teachers build with the students. If you don't surround yourself with people who are able to build those same relationships, then your vision's not going to go any further than that. The mission's not going to carry further anywhere beyond just those teachers if they don't know how to take it forward and build the relationships and build that collective, goal of what we're all trying to do here together. And then once you're able to build that, then you've got power in people because if you've got that trust and you're able to have those communications and discussions and things with one another, then what may have seemed like criticism before now comes across more as trying to help one another. We're all here for the same reason. So here, let me show you how we could do this better. And when you've built that, then it doesn't seem so critical when you're speaking to someone. And then another great thing about it is, you may have a day where you're just, it doesn't matter how great of a leader you are, you're always going to have some days where you're kind of down and out. You may need a little boost. And if you've built that community, then that's when those other people come in and they can kind of pick up the slack for you on those days. So it's just so important that everybody's on the same page in that journey and headed towards the same goals and have built those relationships together.
That's awesome. I had an opportunity to speak to a group of counselors. So part of what I'm doing this year in 2026 was just a extension of what I was doing last year. But this year's phrase for me is go first. And one of the things I built last year was a platform for school counselors. And I always had a great relationship with school counselors because I was a coach. So I was like, okay, I can get my kids in these
Need
type
your
of
counselors.
courses, right? Yeah, they can help me with NCAA regulations. They could do all the things that I need them to do, right? And even when you had that one kid that just is what we like to call can't get right, that needed a little bit of course correction and needed to
Yep.
get recovery, they were always there for you. So I said this to a counseling group and I said, you guys are an important bridge in education. You bridge initiative with opportunity. And there's an opportunity end of the initiative for every
Love that.
student. But every student doesn't get the opportunity because the bridge is not connected. And you're the bridge. And when I said that, I had counselors come up and hugged me like afterwards. They're like, oh my gosh, you saw finally somebody said we were important. So it just takes me back to just thinking about what you're saying. Like, every point, every person in the school has a job to do. Everybody has a cog in the wheel. Everybody has to be moving in the right direction. And it reminds me of those machines, right, that have that one light bulb at the end. And if a cog is broken, then the light doesn't come on, or the cog is turning in the wrong direction, it's not going to work. And so I think to myself, like, collective efficacy is when you can get everybody in line, get everybody in the boat, as PA Flex says, and talks about rowing the boat in the same direction, and nobody's rowing in the opposite direction. Which I live on in a water area, so we do like canoeing and we do paddleboarding and things like that. So anytime you put that stick in the opposite direction, you're gonna start turning in circles. So I want people to know that you have to be moving obviously in the same direction. Is there one specific example building or in your community organization that you work with that you could say collective power actually changed the climate or changed the outcome of something?
Yes, so I could probably give you several examples, and some are kind of larger scale, but probably the most powerful one for me that I come back to involves a student, which I've never say the student's name, but this student came to us troubled. We'll just say troubled, okay? 30, maybe more referrals in a year, that kind of thing. And when he walked through the doors, it was one of those kids that people already said, well, he's just going to be a handful or he's just going to be trouble. And a lot of people would just write him off. So when he came to us, I was able to form a connection with him. He was on my discipline list for referrals, so I saw him often. But when I saw him, yeah, I mean, you know me, how I deal with students. I never was negative. I never showed any type of, you know, um, behavior towards him because of his actions. Just we dealt with the consequences and then we'd have other conversations and move on. So kind of started to see a little bit of a change in him that I thought, what could we actually do with this child if more of us were involved? If I could get some more people to come to the table to just love on him a little bit and be a little bit more patient with him, then what can we actually do for him? So this was his 10th grade year. So I went to, his teachers and some of the other administrators and other people in the building and said, hey, look, we got to do what we can for this kid. There's something here. And, I don't know what it was with that child that just was so heavy on my heart, that there was something there in that child that we had to try to save. I know you can't save everybody, but so I started just kind of, anytime he would do something great, I'd go tell those teachers and I'd tell other people, like, hey, look, he's making some progress. Can we all try to work together? And the more I did that, the more they started to get on board. And then there was some of his teachers who have been major key players in it. Even as he's moved on to other grade levels, they're still kind of little mamas that watch out for him. So what we saw, that year, behavior started to get a little better. Next year, he came back to us. We had some ups and downs, but still not the kid we were when we first walked in that building our 10th grade year. Now here we are, our senior year, halfway through, and it honestly like gives me chills just talking about it. He is going in the military. He came and wanted to show me because he was so proud. He had straight A's. We're talking about a kid who walked in the door, already gave up on him, and he's about to graduate with good grades that he's never had before and going in the military. And he comes to my door all the time to tell me about it. Now, he still comes and asks for snacks, and he still comes and asks for other things, but he doesn't come to my office now for referrals. He comes because he wants me to be proud of something that he's done. And could I have made a difference with him by myself? Probably. But as powerful as it has been without the whole team on board, no, absolutely not. But once we had a team of people working together, same mission, same vision, let's love on this kid, it's just been amazing to watch.
That's awesome. You gave me chills too. And I have a real estate license in the state of Florida, and I know for sure that VA loan is nice. So if he's trying to
Yes,
out
it
and get
is.
$575,000 to buy him a house, he is on the right track and no
There you
money down. For sure. No, that's exciting. That's exciting. In the same vein, beyond schools, how do you believe, or yeah, beyond schools, how do you believe people can use collective power to improve humanity? And not just the systems, but how we treat one another.
I think it comes down to in community, we have to, this applies everywhere, step away from the it's all about me to it's all about we. And I think right now we live in a culture of it's all about me. And that's what our kids see every day on social media. It's everywhere around them. What can I do for me? What can I do for myself? And yeah, it's great to do for yourself, like you talked about before. You have to take care of you before you can pour into anybody else, but you still have to pour into other people.
Absolutely.
It can't just be about me. I have to take what I have and pour into others. So I think if we could apply those principles just in life in general, it's as simple as kindness. Have a little empathy for people sometimes. Look at the people around you at what they don't have and you do have, and be grateful. Gratitude is so huge. I think it's really difficult to be in a place of being down and out and angry if you're in a place of gratitude. And once you're able to be in that space of gratitude, then you are able to be more kind and empathetic to people around you. So I try to remember that everywhere I go, just out in the world every day. Be kind to people. It costs you nothing. It's a very simple thing to do. And I think probably the number one thing we're missing in the world today is kindness to other people. It's sad to say, but it's lacking for sure.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you said it. And sometimes when you say it, you're thinking to yourself, like, that's so simple, but why
Right.
is it so hard? Right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's been many a times where I'm thinking to myself, like, I want to shut this down, or I want to close myself off, or access denied. But
Hmm.
my empathy for just humanity just won't allow me to do it. People have, hit me up and they're like, I thought you might have been mad at me, or and I'm thinking to myself, like, that was your own assumption. And, my grandfather used to have a crazy saying about assuming. But we're not gonna say that here.
I
But
think
with but at the same time, it's like that's on you. You know what I
right,
mean? And so I was really liking the vibe that you're saying, like, let's just start with something simple.
right,
And that was my whole plan. I'm not gonna say it was my plan, it was definitely God's plan, but he's just like, yo, this is where I need you to get up off of your blessed assurance and I need you to get moving. And his thing for me is I need you to help people understand that they're more powerful than they put on to be.
mm,
But they don't have to have $1 million in the bank, or they don't have to have a big platform to be powerful. They can be powerful by just showing kindness to someone else. And you never
right,
know what your kindness will take. You said, I said this earlier about respect. I think it's the same thing for kindness, right? Like it costs you nothing, but the rewards are great. You could be kind to someone, and that kindness can be, replicated by that next person, or it can also come back and be rewarding. You talk about the
right,
student that you had. We don't know what that student is going to look like in 4 years, right? In 4 years, he might come back and be like, hey, this is the one that believed in me. And
mhm,
that could be something that can be beneficial. So I love what you said. It's like a two-part mantra, right? It's like, yes, definitely take care of yourself, but then also don't forget to reach back and take care of. I have one final question because this has been
okay.
amazing. I'm like, dude, this is one of my best interviews I've done. But I do have one final question for you. If you could leave leaders and educators and community members with one responsibility when it comes to collective power, what would it be?
That's a good question. Um, I think that one responsibility would be, well, it's probably going to be more than one part, but don't take it for granted. Don't take advantage of the situation that you've been placed in, and then remember your why. And I know that sounds a little cliche because people kind of always say remember your why, but when I think of it, my why, my number one why is the purpose that God has set out for my life. Okay. The path that He's led me on. Like, I never have a doubt. We talked about in so many things in my own life where I've not been on the right track. But as far as where I'm at in my career and what I do, I've never doubted that I'm completely 100% living in my purpose that the Lord has for me, because I can't imagine doing anything else. And I feel like I was made for what I do. So I try to, keep that in the forefront of my mind at all times. That's my why. That's my purpose. That's why I'm here. It has nothing to do with a leadership title or a leadership role that I've been placed in. It has everything to do with the path and the purpose that God has set me on in my life. So that would be the responsibility I would leave with any leader. Don't take advantage of your role. Don't become so power hungry that you forget what you've been placed there for, because what was given to you can be quickly taken right back away. And I think it's just, it's important to remember what you've been put there for.
Oh, that's so powerful. That's so powerful. And I'm so thankful for you that I even have you a gift. So whether you're in studio virtually or whether you're in studio
I
and you
love
have a
it.
collective conversations
I love it.
shirt, you're going
Can't wait
to
to
be
get
getting
it.
this. And I'm super excited that you have it.
Nice.
Um,
I
I
will
just
be at
want
the
to
beach soon, so hold it for me.
I got you. I got you. Listen, I'm going to hold you to that. Yes, and I
Yes.
definitely will hold for you. And we wanted to make sure that you had that. This conversation reminds me and reminds us that leadership is relational and conscious driven and collective by design. And having a leader like you on this platform is so important to the collective conversation that we must have in building community consciousness and collective power. This is Collective Conversations, and remember to love each other, build trust with each other, and never forget your why. Thank you so much, Miss Kristy. I appreciate you
Thank
so
you.
much for coming on here.
I loved
And I just want everybody to go out here, listen to this conversation, share this conversation, like and subscribe, because liking and subscribing is an easy thing to do to share the good news of a collective conversation. Because remember, collective conversations are where community, consciousness, and collective power all meet. Thank you so much.